Good morning, friends, and welcome to another episode of Sutta Study. So hello to a few people checking in. So hello, Gita Jnana. Hello, Chittapala. Is this the same Chittapala from New York Insight last night? Hello, Sarah, Michael, EA, Miguel, Robin, Kauser Friend, and Poonam. So good to see all of you checking in. And hello to whoever else is watching and hasn't said anything. Hello, Elaine. Good to see you as well. So, as usual, I'll read through the sutta and give some explanations. And at the end of the time, you're welcome to type in questions and I'll answer them. Also, feel free to type in questions at any time while I'm explaining the sutta. That helps to make sure I get to everyone's questions at the end. So I'll go ahead and begin with the discourse. So this is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Fives, Sutta number 196, Mahasupina Sutta, which is translated here as significant dreams. And the sutta is interesting for a number of reasons. One reason is because in the suttas, the Buddha very rarely mentions dreams. He almost never speaks about it. There's only a handful of suttas where the Buddha even mentions dreams at all. And when he does, on rare occasion, mention dreams, it's usually in a fairly dismissive way. So, for example, there's one sutta where the Buddha says that there are a few different things that can cause dreams. One of them is indigestion, another is sickness, and another, and he goes through a list of perfectly ordinary reasons why you might have dreams. And on the list, he also mentions receiving messages from celestial beings. That's another reason you might have a dream. But most of the reasons he gives are indicating that dreams are basically meaningless noise most of the time, not of any particular significance. But this is one sutta where the Buddha actually does talk about significant dreams. And in particular, he's talking about his own significant dreams prior to attaining awakening. So I'll go ahead and start reading through the sutta and talk a little bit about these dreams that the Buddha had. So the Buddha says, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, the worthy one, the fully self-awakened one, while he was still an unawakened bodhisattva, 5 significant dreams appeared to him. What 5? So this is setting the theme for the sutta. So first off, note that the Buddha is referring to himself in the third person, as he often does. And in this case, it's emphasizing his qualities of being a Buddha. So he's not saying, I am this or I am that. He's just saying, before the awakening of the Tathagata, so before the Buddha attained enlightenment, these dreams appeared to him. So he is referring to the qualities of a Buddha, the aspects of a Buddha. So when the Buddha is speaking about the qualities and aspects of a Buddha, he's referring to something universal that applies to all Buddhas. So it doesn't actually specifically state whether all Buddhas have these prophetic dreams prior to attaining awakening. But in the case, I think in the commentaries, it does say that all Buddhas have some kind of indication that they're going to attain awakening. So whether they're all exactly identical, I strongly doubt. But there's some indication that the mind is clearly pointed towards enlightenment, that the mind will inevitably reach enlightenment. The specific details may vary from Buddha to Buddha, but the overall overarching principle remains the same. So this is before the Buddha attained enlightenment. He had 5 significant dreams. So the first one, he says, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, the worthy one, the fully self-awakened one, while he was still an unawakened bodhisattva, he was reclining on this great earth with Himalaya, the mountain king, as his pillow, his left hand in the eastern ocean, his right hand in the western ocean, and both of his feet in the southern ocean. Monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, the worthy one, the fully self-awakened one, when he was still an unawakened bodhisattva, this is the first significant dream that appeared to him. So later in the sutta, the Buddha will explain the meaning of each of these similes. So to start with, I'll just read through each of the 5 dreams. And then when the Buddha gives his explanations, then I'll talk about it in more detail. So the first dream is the Buddha lying on India, the Indian subcontinent, with his head resting in the Himalayas, his like one hand in each ocean, and his feet hanging off the southern end of the continent. So he's covering the entire Indian continent with his body. Then the second dream, he says, again, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, the worthy one, the fully self-awakened one, while he was still an unawakened bodhisattva, a kind of grass called a cross grew from his navel all the way to the sky. Monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, etc., this is the second significant dream that appeared to him. Then the third one, again, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, while he was still an unawakened bodhisattva, white worms with black heads crawled up from his feet and covered him up to his knees. Monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, etc. This is the third significant dream that appeared to him. Then the fourth one, it says, again, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, 4 birds of different colors came from 4 different directions, landed at his feet, and turned completely white. This is the fourth significant dream that appeared to him. And the fifth one, he says, again, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, he walked up to the top of a mountain of feces, but the feces did not stick to him. So monks, this is the fifth significant dream that appeared to him. So these were the 5 prophetic dreams that the Buddha had that foretold his enlightenment. So next section of this sutta, the Buddha will explain the meaning of each of these 5 dreams. So then the Buddha says, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, etc., when he was reclining on this great earth with Himalaya, the mountain king, as his pillow, his left hand in the eastern ocean, his right hand in the western ocean, and both of his feet in the southern ocean, this symbolized his supreme awakening to unsurpassed complete awakening. Because of his impending supreme awakening, this first significant dream appeared. So the way I understand this is that just as his body was covering the entire landmass of India, in the same way his understanding would cover the entire world. His understanding would completely encompass every aspect of reality. So this is indicating the totality and completeness of the Buddha's understanding. So an understanding which is far beyond normal human capabilities. An understanding which is far beyond that of ordinary people. Another way of understanding this simile is that the Buddha's teachings would spread all throughout India, as they did within a few hundred years of the Buddha's passing. But the main point that's being indicated here, once again, is that this is indicating the totality and completeness of the Buddha's understanding upon attaining awakening. This also indicates to some degree the majesty and power of the Buddha. This image of completely covering the continent of India, so using the continent of India as one giant bed, is also indicating the power that the Buddha has over ordinary worldly concerns. So not being affected, on not being conquerable by anything in the world. There's other suttas which speak a bit about the undefeatability of the Buddha, such as stating that it's impossible for a Buddha to be killed. So a Buddha cannot die by murder. A Buddha can only die of natural causes. There's no living being in the world which is capable of defeating a Buddha. And that's because a Buddha has a absolutely thorough and complete understanding of the nature of reality. So there's no way that any being could overcome him or overpower him or subdue him in any way. The second dream, so he says, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, when a kind of grass called a cross grew from his navel all the way to the sky, this symbolized his supreme awakening to the Noble Eightfold Path, which would be displayed well to both angels and humans. Because of his impending supreme awakening, the second significant dream appeared. So there's a few things which are symbolized in this dream. So first off, the name of the grass, it's called a cross. So this represents that the teachings of the Buddha, the practices that the Buddha teaches, bring us across the ocean of samsara. So a common image that's used in the suttas is that of crossing from the near shore, which is dangerous, to the far shore, which is safe. So the near shore represents samsara, the world of unenlightened beings. The far shore is nibbana, which is enlightenment. So the grass being called a cross is already indicating that it's the way to cross from delusion to enlightenment. So growing from his navel to the sky, it indicates here is indicating that his teachings would be applicable both to humans, so at ground level, all the way up to the highest devas, the highest of the celestial beings and spirits, so all the way up to the sky. So this is indicating the universality of the Dhamma. So the Dhamma is not something which only applies to specific people under specific circumstances, but it's something which has universal applicability. It applies to all sentient beings and all forms of life, all forms of existence. Of course, whether or not people choose to practice the Dhamma is their own choice. How people apply it is their own choice. If they take an interest in it at all is their own choice. But if they do choose to take an interest, then it's applicable. No matter what kind of being one is, one can live in accordance with Dhamma. Then the third dream, he says, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, when white worms with black heads crawled up from his feet and covered him up to his knees, this symbolized that many lay people in white clothing would go to the Tathagata for lifelong refuge. Because of his impending supreme awakening, this third significant dream appeared. So white worms with black heads. So the white body represents the white clothing that people traditionally wear when they go to Buddhist temples. So that's a tradition which comes all the way from ancient India and is still seen today, especially in Southeast Asia. So Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, it's still quite common for people to wear white clothing when they go to visit Buddhist temples and monasteries. And the black head represents that they have hair. So monks, no hair. Lay people usually have hair. Especially in ancient India, the only people who didn't have hair were criminals, outcasts, and monks. Everybody else had hair. It was a social expectation. So to shave one's head was an act of extreme rebellion. To shave one's head was stating, I am no longer part of ordinary society. I am no longer involved in social constructs of any sort. So again, it was taken as a given that if somebody was a layperson, then they would have hair. And of course, this being India, everyone has dark hair. So black head, black hair symbolizes lay people. So the significance of this dream is that the Buddha's teachings are also not just for monks, but therefore anybody who chooses to bring their life more closely in line with the Dhamma. Anyone who wants to live a life of happiness, peace, and wisdom can gain benefit from the Buddha's teachings. So this is the symbolism of this dream, and also that it comes all the way up to his knees. It indicates that it's not just a handful of disciples, but that he would be literally swarming with lay disciples, with people who wanted to draw close to the Buddha and close to the Dhamma and close to the Sangha. Then the fourth dream says, monks before the awakening of the Tathagata, when 4 birds of different colors came from 4 different directions, landed at his feet and turned completely white. This symbolized that people from all 4 castes, aristocrats, Brahmins, peasants, and laborers, would leave behind lay life, become homeless renunciants, and realize unsurpassed liberation. Because of his impending supreme awakening, this 4th significant dream appeared. So this 4th dream is prophesying the formation of the monastic communities. And it's emphasizing that the monastic community would bring people from all levels of society, from all backgrounds. So from the lowest peasant to the highest king, all of them would be drawn to the Buddha's teachings. And all of them would have the opportunity to become monastics. And in so doing, to leave behind their prior social designation. So note that when the 4 birds come, initially they're of different colors, indicating that they're from different social strata. But once they become monastics, they turn completely white. So white is a color that symbolizes purity. Again, another reason why people would wear white clothing when they go to the monastery. It symbolizes purity. So all the distinctions between whether someone's a peasant or an aristocrat or a Brahmin or low class or high class, low wealth, high wealth, this race or that race, this ethnicity or that ethnicity, this nationality or that nationality, all of that becomes completely irrelevant once somebody enters the monastic community. Once somebody enters the monastic community, they're simply a monk. That's it. All those prior distinctions are irrelevant. And also then there's the opportunity to attain complete purity. The opportunity to achieve the highest possible goal of the Buddhist life, which is, while theoretically possible as a layperson, it's much more difficult as a layperson. It's much easier as a monastic. Then the 5th dream, this one also quite colorful. It says, monks before the awakening of the Tathagata, when he walked up to the top of a mountain of feces, but the feces did not stick to him, this symbolized that he would acquire robes, alms food, dwelling places, medicines, and medical supplies, but he would use them untied, uninfatuated, unstuck, seeing the drawbacks, discerning the escape. Because of his impending supreme awakening, this 5th significant dream appeared. So every now and then people accuse me of giving feces talks too often, of too often speaking about feces in relationship to samsara. But I draw my inspiration from our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, who also used the simile of feces fairly often when talking about samsara. So this simile is saying, yeah, there are lots of nice things you can get in the world: nice clothes, nice food, nice houses, nice medicines. It's all a giant pile of feces. Nonetheless, we do need to use these things in order to survive. So if one uses them without attachment, without obsession, without infatuation, just recognizing their function and seeing the dangers of obsession with them, the drawbacks that come from being obsessed with them, and recognizing that through disenchantment and dispassion, one can use them without failing, then one is not stained by them. One is not tainted by them. One does not produce unwholesome mind states on account of them. So the simile here, again, Buddha has tremendous merit, tremendous good karma from past lives. So that means that a Buddha tends to accumulate tremendous amounts of wealth very easily. People always want to give things to a Buddha. They always want to support a Buddha. So he would accumulate a tremendous mountain of worldly wealth, but it wouldn't stick to him. And the reason it wouldn't stick to him is because of his own purity of mind. So it's the same with us as practitioners. We do recognize that we need certain things to get by. We need clothes, we need food, we need a place to live, and from time to time we need medicines. But we should always remember the essential function of these things and not to obsess about them. Not to get caught up in wanting special food, not to get caught up in wanting fancy clothing, not to get caught up in wanting an extravagant dwelling place. So not going beyond what's necessary. And even within the domain of what's necessary, we recognize that all these things are temporary, unsatisfying, and impersonal. And that if we obsess about them, then that will inhibit the development of true happiness. So in this way, one recognizes the mountain of feces as just being feces, and therefore one is not stained by it, one is not affected by it. So then he wraps up. He says, monks, before the awakening of the Tathagata, the worthy one, the fully self-awakened one, while he was still an unawakened bodhisattva, these 5 significant dreams appeared to him. So just reiterating once again that there were these 5 prophetic dreams which foretold the Buddha's awakening, and in particular these 5 aspects of the Buddha's awakening. First, the all-encompassing nature of his wisdom, symbolized by lying down on the Indian subcontinent. Second, the universal applicability of his teachings, able to reach all the way from earthly beings all the way to the highest heavens, symbolized by the grass growing up from his navel to the sky. Third, the tremendous number of lay people who would benefit from the Buddha's teachings, symbolized by the white worms with black heads crawling up to his knees. Fourth, the transformative nature of the monastic sangha in cutting through social distinctions of caste, race, ethnicity, and so on, and transforming all who enter it into a vehicle for liberation. So symbolized by the 4 birds of different colors coming and landing at his feet and turning white. And finally, his ability to acquire tremendous quantities of worldly supports, but without being dirtied by them, without falling into any kind of defiled mind state on account of them. Symbolized by him climbing up the mountain of feces, but without being dirtied by it. So that's the end of this sutta. I don't really have anything else to say about them. I think they're relatively straightforward. So at this time, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the live chat, and I'll answer as best I can. I see there's already some questions. So I'll go ahead and start going through what's here. So first off, Ishan, hello Ishan. Enlightened atheist Ansh. I don't think there's any such thing as an enlightened atheist, but nonetheless, welcome. Good evening. Hello Vimukti. Yes, you can visit our temple maybe in the spring. Send us an email in March after our retreat is over. Hello Melody. And Sarah Smith asks, Bhante, do you think these dreams occurred when asleep or in insight meditation? Well, honestly, I think he was sleeping. So the word supina means dream, but it also can simply mean sleep. And actually, it's related to the word supine. So supine means to be lying down in a sleep-like state. So I would say that the Buddha was almost certainly sleeping at the time. I don't think this happened during meditation. Keep in mind, this was before he attained enlightenment. So this was when he still had tremendous parami, so tremendous good karma leading to awakening. But he was not yet fully enlightened. And we don't know when this occurred. So whether this occurred a few minutes before his enlightenment, or a few days, or a few years, whether it occurred when he was a child, or even possibly in past lives, we don't know. We know that he had these 5 dreams, but we don't know when they were. But I do personally suspect it was while sleeping, not while meditating. If somebody was meditating, we probably wouldn't call it a dream. We would call it a vision. If you're dreaming during meditation, that indicates that you're sleeping, not meditating. And that's more of a problem. If you're dreaming during your meditation, that's an indication that your meditation is a waste of time, and you need to work on cultivating alertness. Then we have another question. Gita asks, Bhante, have you heard of other monastics having similar dreams when one is close to awakening? Yes. Ajahn Mun had some interesting dreams prior to attaining awakening, which foretold that he would attain enlightenment, but that he would not have the full set of psychic powers. So if I recall, the details of his dream was that in his dream, he came across a Tipitaka bookcase. So it's a particular, in Thailand, you can find these where it's a bookshelf which comes with a set of the Pali Canon, the Tipitaka. So it's a distinctly recognizable thing. So he came across a Tipitaka case with all the Pali Canon books in it, but he couldn't open it. So what this symbolized to him was the fact that he got the Tipitaka case meant that he would attain enlightenment. He would have the full knowledge of the Buddha. But because he couldn't open it meant that he wouldn't have access to all the secrets, all the hidden knowledges. So he wouldn't have access to the full scope of psychic powers. But that dream was an example of somebody having a prophetic indication that they would attain awakening. There's other stories I've heard along similar lines, but Ajahn Mun is probably the most well-known. Let's see, other questions. Kausar friend asks, for what purpose would the Buddha have told his followers about these dreams? if dreams are generally not useful, why this emphasis rather than a more straightforward simile around these 5 things? Yeah, that's a good question. Why did the Buddha uh, tell his followers about these dreams? Well, I mean, he must have had a good reason for it. First off, while I mentioned earlier, most dreams are meaningless or useless. That's not the case for all dreams. So I think the Buddha was pointing here that there are such thing as prophetic dreams, and that those dreams sometimes do symbolize something of importance. So I think this is relevant also because it gives some inspiration. It gives some sense that if we're on the right track, then we might see indications that we're on the right track. Similarly, if we're on the wrong track, we might get some indications that we're on the wrong track. So I think it's noteworthy in that the Buddha is balancing out the other messages elsewhere in the suttas, where he's again speaking of dreams in a more dismissive way. So it's more balanced here. He's giving some statements where he's dismissing dreams as mostly useless, and then other statements where he's saying, but there can be times when there's some meaning to them or significance to them. And again, these 5 particular dreams, I find the meaning of each one and the imagery of each one quite potent. And there is quite a big difference between somebody just posing these similes as though it was something they made up, versus someone saying, I actually had these as real dream experiences, which indicated that I would attain awakening and that would have such and such qualities. So for me, the sutta has an impact which is much beyond what it would be if the Buddha had simply said, presented it as 5 similes without mentioning dreaming whatsoever. So that's the last of the questions. So if there's any other questions, this is your opportunity. If there's no other questions, then we'll end with a shorter than usual sutta study time, which is perfectly fine. There's no rule or law that says sutta study has to go until 9 o'clock. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think that indicates that we're wrapping up for the morning. So thank you all for joining in. So please do continue to participate. We'll be following our usual schedule, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of every week. So sutta study at 8 a.m. And meditation and Dhamma talk at 7:30 p.m. So all of that Eastern US time. And each week for the next 2 months, we'll be on retreat. So each week there'll be one monk giving all the talks. So this week and next week will be all me. Whether that's good news or bad news depends on your preferences. And then after that, we'll switch between the other resident monks until the end of the retreat. And then in March, we'll go back to a more regular schedule. So thank you all for joining in, and we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you this evening.